I want to start by saying something I never said out loud for most of my life. I was tired. Not just physically tired. Soul tired. The kind of tired that doesn't go away after a good night's sleep. The kind that settles into your bones slowly, so slowly you don't even notice it happening. You just wake up one day and realize you've been exhausted for years. I'm 64 now, retired, and I have a granddaughter who just went back to work after maternity leave. She called me last week, voice thin, said, "Grandma, I don't know how you did it. I can barely keep up and she's only 3 months old." And I didn't tell her what I wanted to tell her. I didn't say, "Baby, I didn't keep up either." I just kept going. And I paid for it in ways I'm still counting. I smiled into the phone and said something gentle. But I've been thinking about her ever since. And I think it's time I confess some things. Not to teach. Not to lecture, just to say what I know now that I didn't know then. So if you're a young working mom watching this, maybe feeding a baby, maybe folding laundry at 11 p.m., maybe crying in your car in the parking lot before you walk into work, this one is for you. Pull up a chair. I'm not going anywhere. When I was in my 30s, I wore my busyness like a medal. I had 3 kids, a full-time job as a hospital administrator, a husband who worked long hours, a mother-in-law who needed checking on, and a house that I insisted on keeping clean because what would people say if it wasn't? I was the woman who never said no to anyone about anything. Can you chair the school fundraiser? Sure. Can you cover the weekend shift? I'll make it work. Can you host Christmas? Of course. And every time I said yes, I told myself it was strength. I told myself I was handling it. I told myself this was what good mothers do, what good employees do, what good women do. What I didn't see, what I couldn't see, was the quiet invoice being written behind the scenes. Every late night I worked while my kids slept, that cost something. Every dinner I missed because a meeting ran over, that cost something. Every time my daughter said, "Mommy, come play," and I said in a minute and the minute never came, that cost something. I told myself, this is temporary. Once things settle down, I'll be present. Once we pay off the house. Once the kids are older. Once I get promoted. Once. The once never came. Because busyness doesn't have an end. It has a current. And if you let it, it will carry you right through the years you meant to live. That's what I call the trade-off of busyness. You trade presents for productivity, thinking you'll buy the presents back later. But presents doesn't work that way. You can't buy back Tuesday 1994. You can't get back the afternoon your son scored his first goal and you were in a conference room. The trade is final. The receipt is permanent. I didn't know that at 34. I know it now at 64. Here's what nobody talks about. The cost of always doing more, always being more, always pushing further. It doesn't just show up in your relationships. It shows up in your body. It shows up in your bank account. It shows up in places you don't expect, at times you can't predict. When I was 52, I had a health scare. Nothing catastrophic, thank God. But it was a warning. My blood pressure had been high for years. I knew this, my doctor knew this, but I was too busy to slow down enough to manage it properly. I'd miss medication doses, skip follow-up appointments, tell myself I'd rest after the next big project. The doctor sat me down and said something I've never forgotten. She said, "You're spending your health to earn your living. One day you will spend your living to try to buy back your health. It's a terrible exchange rate. I went home and thought about what she said for a long time. She was right. I had spent years treating my body like a machine, refueling it just enough to keep running, ignoring the warning lights, pushing through the breakdowns. And the cost? Chronic fatigue, stress-related inflammation, a back that still doesn't let me garden the way I want to, a nervous system that took years to calm down after I retired because it had been in emergency mode for so long it forgot how to rest. And the money piece, because we have to talk about it. All those years I thought I was building security, and in some ways I was, but I also spent money on things that exhaustion demanded. Convenience food because I had no energy to cook. Things for my children to compensate for not being there. Clothes that made me look put together when I felt like I was falling apart inside. Small luxuries to reward myself for surviving another brutal week. I wasn't building wealth. I was managing exhaustion with money. And that's different. If I had slowed down even a little, if I had worked smarter instead of just harder, if I had been honest about what was enough, I believe I would have saved more, stressed less, and made better financial decisions from a calmer mind. Exhausted people don't make their best choices. That's not weakness. That's just physiology. The hidden cost is this: we think we're building something, and we are, but we're also dismantling something. And the dismantling is quieter, slower, easier to ignore. Until it isn't. My youngest son is 38 now. He called me a few years ago. This was around the holidays, and he said something that broke my heart open in the most gentle way. He said, "Mom, you know what I remember most about childhood? Not the vacations, not Christmas morning. I remember the Saturday mornings when you weren't working, when you'd make pancakes and we'd just sit there. You weren't rushing. You were just there." I cried after we hung up, because those Saturday mornings, I always felt guilty about them. I'd be sitting there with my kids and thinking about what I should be doing, thinking about the report due Monday, the email I hadn't answered, the meeting I needed to prep for. I was physically present, but mentally I was somewhere else half the time. And yet, those were his best memories. Not because I was doing anything extraordinary, but because I was there. Fully bodily, actually there. That taught me something I wish I had understood decades earlier. I call it the presence principle. The people who love you don't need your performance. They need your presence. Your kids don't need a perfectly managed household. They need to feel that you see them. Your body doesn't need you to achieve more. It needs you to rest. Your soul doesn't need more accomplishments. It needs you to sit still long enough to remember who you are beneath all the doing. Presence is not a luxury. It is the whole point. I spent so many years treating presence like a reward. Something I'd give myself and my family once I'd earned enough, done enough, succeeded enough. But presence is not a reward. It's a practice. And like any practice, if you keep postponing it, you lose the habit. The muscle atrophies. You forget how to just be somewhere without planning your exit. I'm still learning this even now. Some days I have to remind myself that it's okay to sit in the backyard and do nothing. That rest is not laziness. That being still is not falling behind. If I could go back, I would practice presence earlier. Not perfectly, I don't believe in perfection, but intentionally. I would remind myself regularly, this moment is not a waiting room. This is the life. This might be the hardest thing I've ever had to admit. For most of my life, I didn't know where enough was. I don't mean enough in the spiritual airy-fairy sense. I mean it practically. I didn't have a clear line in my mind that said, when I reach this, I can relax. When the house is paid off. When the kids are through college. When I make a certain salary. When I retire. I kept moving the line. Every time I got close to what I thought was enough, I'd look around and find a new reason it wasn't. Someone else had more. Something else needed doing. Some new worry emerged. It's a trap. And I think it's a trap that falls particularly hard on women who grew up being told they had to prove themselves. We carry a low-grade anxiety that says, you haven't done enough, you haven't earned your rest, you haven't secured your position. And so we keep going, and keep going, and keep going, until something stops us. For me, it was retirement. For some women, it's an illness. For some, it's a relationship that finally breaks under the weight of neglect. For some, it's a child who looks at them one day and says, you were always working. Whatever stops you. I hope it's gentler than it was for some of us. The enough line is something you have to draw yourself consciously on purpose, not waiting for circumstances to tell you when to stop. Because circumstances will never tell you to stop. The world will always have more for you to do. More to earn, more to prove, more to manage. You have to decide, this is enough. This moment is enough. I am enough. Not as a resignation, not as giving up, but as a deliberate act of wisdom. What does enough look like in practical terms? It looks different for everyone. For me, in hindsight, it would have looked like working my contracted hours and actually leaving. Taking weekends seriously. Saying no to one thing a week that I didn't genuinely need to say yes to. Having a number in my savings account and feeling safe at it, rather than always reaching for more. It would have looked like trusting myself enough to rest. So here's what I want to say to you, young working mom. The one watching this at midnight. The one who ran herself ragged today and is still not sure she did enough. Exhaustion is not a badge of honor. I know the culture tells you it is. I know people talk about being slammed and swamped and crazy busy like it's a status symbol. I know the unspoken rule that suffering quietly is somehow noble. But it isn't. It's just suffering. The most important things in your life, your children, your health, your marriage, your friendship, your peace of mind, they do not require your exhaustion. They require your presence. And presence requires some degree of rest. You cannot pour from empty. I know that's a cliche, but I've lived it and it's true. When I was at my most depleted, I was also my most impatient mother, my most resentful wife, my most anxious self. I was giving everyone the worst of me while saving nothing for myself and calling it sacrifice. It wasn't sacrifice. It was depletion. And depletion helps nobody. If I could go back to my 30-something self, I would sit her down and say, the laundry can wait. The report can wait. The people who love you cannot wait. Not because they'll leave, but because they'll grow up. They'll move on. They'll build their lives. And then you'll be where I am. Retired, grateful, loved, and quietly carrying the memory of all the minutes you were somewhere else. Rest is not laziness. Saying no is not failure. Leaving work at work is not a lack of commitment. These are acts of self-preservation. And self-preservation is not selfish. It's the foundation of everything you're trying to build. Draw your enough line and honor it. I'm 64. I have a beautiful life. Beautiful children who turned out more than all right. A body that still carries me through my days, even if more slowly now. A retirement I'm learning to enjoy without guilt. But I also have regrets. I try to hold them gently, not punishingly. They're part of me. And if even one of them can save one young woman from her own version of my regrets, then this quiet little confession will have been worth saying. You don't have to earn your rest. You just have to take it.